She walked in without trying to impress anyone and somehow became the most magnetic person in that room. A complete stranger opened up to her within minutes because something about her presence simply felt completely safe. She listened with her whole self, not just her ears, and that made every person she talked to feel extraordinary. She sat alone in total silence and felt absolutely no need to fill it with anything because she was already complete. She was not performing, she was not trying, she was simply herself, and that was more than enough to draw everyone in. When her friend shared good news, her joy was so genuine. There was not a single trace of jealousy anywhere inside her. Someone challenged her opinion, and instead of defending herself, she leaned and smiled and said, "Tell me more about that." She looked at the person across from her so deeply that they walked away feeling like they truly finally mattered. She laughed at her own mistake so freely and so openly that everyone around her felt safe enough to be imperfect too. She stood on that rooftop alone, needing nothing from the world, because everything she needed she had already found within herself. She treated the vendor at that market with the exact same warmth she gave everyone else, because that is just who she is. She never tried to be the center of the room, and yet somehow everyone always ended up moving toward her anyway. She looked in that mirror not to fix herself, but to finally acknowledge the person who had always been there. She moved through the world without performing for a single soul, and that quiet ease made her impossible for anyone to ignore. She sat at that window writing not for anyone else, but for the version of herself she was still becoming every day. In the middle of all that chaos around her, she remained the stillest, most grounded person in the entire space. She disappeared into that book completely and felt no need to announce her presence to anyone because she was already enough. She gave that compliment freely and completely without expecting a single thing back because giving felt natural to who she was. She sat alone with her coffee and felt no emptiness because she had learned to be her own best company first. People leaned in when she spoke not because she was loud, but because everything she said carried something real and worth hearing. She put her phone away and gave that friend the one thing most people never receive anymore, her complete presence. She walked through that garden alone and found genuine wonder in every single detail that most people walk right past daily. She worked hard in that gym, not for anyone watching, but purely for the person she was committed to becoming herself. Both sides of that argument calmed down the moment she arrived, because her presence alone made everyone feel genuinely heard and safe. She closed her book and gave that stranger her full attention, because to her every single person deserves to feel completely seen. She stood in that boardroom not to perform, but simply because she believed deeply in what she had to say today. Under those stars, she wrote down every honest truth about herself, because she was never afraid of the person she was becoming. She noticed a stranger sitting alone and walked over not because it was expected, but simply because it felt right. She stood in that gallery completely absorbed in her own thoughts, needing no one beside her to make the moment feel complete. Her laugh was so real and so completely uninhibited that everyone around her forgot what they were worried about entirely. She danced alone in that kitchen with pure, unself-conscious joy, and that freedom to simply be herself was breathtakingly beautiful to witness. She held space for her friend without offering a single solution, because sometimes the greatest gift you can give is simply your presence. She walked that shoreline alone at sunrise, feeling entirely whole, because she had stopped waiting for someone else to complete her. She created not to be seen or praised or noticed, but because that creative fire inside her simply needed to burn. She held that door open with a smile that asked for absolutely nothing back, because kindness was simply her natural language. She reached across that table and held her friend's hand, saying nothing at all, because sometimes silence is the deepest form of love. She stood at the edge of that mountain, breathing it all in, and felt no need to share the moment with anyone else. She raised her hand not to be noticed, but because she genuinely believed her perspective might add something valuable to everyone. She sat in that stillness every single morning and built a relationship with herself that no one else could ever take away. She caught her own eyes in that mirror and smiled not at her reflection, but at the person she had finally become. She sat at that outdoor cafe writing every honest thought down because she was never afraid of her own inner truth. She showed up to volunteer with everything she had because giving without keeping score was simply the way she lived. She sat beside that nervous stranger, and within moments they forgot they had ever felt anxious or alone at all. She walked through those autumn colors, completely present and unhurried, because she had learned that beauty only reveals itself to the patient. She said, "I was wrong," without flinching, without shrinking, and in that moment became the most respected person in the room. She sat alone on that rooftop with the city glowing below and felt absolutely no loneliness because she was her own home. She helped that stranger find exactly what they were looking for, not because anyone asked her to, but because it felt right. She sat across from that mentor and listened so completely that every word landed somewhere deep and permanent inside her. She stood at the edge of that cliff, looking at the ocean, feeling more complete and whole than she had ever felt before. She dropped everything, laughed freely, and completely moved on instantly because she had long stopped taking herself too seriously in life. She listened in that circle without once planning what she would say, because she understood that real connection begins with truly hearing others. She worked alone in that library with no one watching, because her standards were set by her own values, not by applause. She made her tea in that quiet morning kitchen and felt that the most beautiful moments in life are the simplest ones. She swung gently in that empty park at sunset, completely alone, and felt more full and alive than most crowded rooms ever made her. She received that criticism with an open heart and a calm mind, because she knew that growth always feels uncomfortable before it feels good. She stood at that window, watching the golden city light below, feeling grateful for every version of herself that had brought her here. She sat surrounded by those books, completely lit up from inside, because learning was never a task for her, it was pure oxygen. She stepped into that morning sunlight with quiet, unstoppable, purposeful energy, because she had finally stopped waiting for permission to fully be herself. She stood in that open field with her face toward the sun and accepted every single part of herself without a single reservation. She looked at that reflection and finally saw not her flaws, but the extraordinary, rare, and deeply beautiful person she had always been.